Who's that? Commander Claw. Who's bad? Commander Claw. Welcome to the quick guide as you deck build this new Marvel Commander Iron Man Titan of Innovation. The reason why I made this is because this is my favorite commander, so you know I put in that TLC, that tender love and care in this quick guide as you look for ideas on how you plan on building this commander. And I will tell you, the most important thing as you deck build this commander, hear me out. The most important thing as you build this commander is artifacts. Artifacts do every ability in the game. So what do I mean? There's an artifact out there in the Magic universe that does at least one ability of something. So I believe that is what makes Iron Man the most powerful Marvel commander. So as a quick example, for example, artifacts are out there giving players poison counters. There's artifacts that mill entire libraries. There's artifacts that drain lives. There's artifacts that untap permanents. So what I'm trying to tell you is you don't generally have to build Iron Man the suggested way. It's just his ability, this birthing pod effect, allows you to tutor any artifact. So you can build your Iron Man any way you want to, depending on the artifact. Now, the next important thing as you deck build this commander is deciding on a win con. Do not get stuck in decision paralysis. The most important thing is to decide on a win con. Win con can be through commander damage, combat damage, or you could build them as a Spellslinger type of commander. Those are just 2/3 ways. There's many ways, but I say you need to choose a win con and stick with it because that's the goal for the type of artifacts that you will be tutoring for. You need to build your artifact base based on how you plan on winning the game. If you don't do that, this commander is very open-ended and you could be stuck just tutoring any type of artifact and not really have a game plan. So if you do have a game plan, which is make sure you have a win con and get supporting artifacts for that win con, then obviously put in other stuff to, support it. So this is important. This is how you use the guide, right? There's going to be timestamps of each theme. You don't have to watch the entire video from the beginning to the end. I would love for you to, but I know you guys are not. So you can literally skip to a theme and get the idea of what I'm trying to share with you. All right. As you search and look for cards, think about the themes and listen to what I'm saying and the words that I'm putting out there. These are just like the keyword terms and words to find what you want to do with Iron Man, Titan of Innovation. So first up, we got Spellslinger. Those are players who want to cast a bunch of instants and sorceries to win the game eventually. Clones. Artifacts are really good at cloning, making copies of tokens. Blue does that well. Red does that well by giving them haste. So you'll be able to do that in this Izzet colored commander. Stax. Stax is denying resources to players. That could be yourself included, but also mainly towards your opponents. Infinite combos. In the infinite combos section, you're going to find 2 combos that I put in there as suggestions for your possible win con. To support your possible win con. Next up, token increase. So there's type of cards that increase the amount of tokens you get. Iron Man does create a treasure token. So now imagine creating 2, 3, 4, whatever the case may be. That's that section. The following sections, we got mana rocks. Mana rocks are super important, okay? That's how you ramp and get more mana to activate more spells, abilities, permanents, yada, yada, yada. Next up, we got equipments. Some players will want to win by commander damage or make Iron Man the ultimate Voltron commander. That's that section. Cost reducers. Cost reducers can be in the form of reducing the amount of mana paid for permanents or spells. Protection. You got to protect your commander. What I really want to say is Magic is a game that's very in depth, and there's a bunch of cards out there. So as you research and find more cards, some of them have synergies with this type of commander. Next up is overlook cards. Cards that I believe bring more value depending on your win con. And I think you'll actually enjoy that. A lot of players are new to the game, so they don't know a lot of the older cards. And older cards could be like 3 years ago. All those players that know how long Magic's been around, they release sets so often that you forget about cards a year ago, and they're just in your bulk box. Why should you play with Iron Man Titan of Innovation? It's because you actually get to play with the artifacts that you would love to play with. Generally, they're high CMC, super expensive, they're stuck somewhere in your 99, you never got to draw the card, whatever. This bypasses all that because its birthing pod ability literally tutors it and puts it onto the battlefield. That's why this card is popular and powerful. So let me read what he does. Iron Man, 5 mana, blue red, 3 colorless. Legendary artifact creature, human hero. Woo! Flying haste on a 4/4 body, meaning he just flies in, or as soon as you cast him, he deals 4 damage straight up to your opponent once he attacks without blockers. Anyways, he has Genius Industrialist. Whenever Iron Man attacks, create a treasure token. Treasure tokens, you tap it, sack it, and create 1 mana of any color. Then you may sacrifice a non-creature artifact. Okay, when we do that, what do we get? If you do, you search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice artifact mana value, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Let's unpack this. First of all, if you're new to Magic, this is Birthing Pod, but this is even better because it's artifacts. What did I say in the beginning of this video? That artifacts, there is an artifact out there that does some ability out there, every ability, whatever. There's an artifact that does some kind of ability. You get to actually do that. Tutor that. Put it onto the battlefield. What's nasty about this commander is you can sacrifice a treasure token and get a 1 CMC artifact and put it onto the battlefield. If you bought the Marvel pack, whatever, with Iron Man, he comes with Commander's Plate. For 1 mana, you get to put Commander's Plate onto Iron Man. Commander Plate is an amazing card. That's a very expensive card. That is a staple. That literally protects your commander from other colors. Wow. Okay, so the rest of the video, make sure you skip to the section that you would love to see about the different themes of artifacts, because essentially this is an artifact guide on the commander. I will start off with Spellslingers, which is my favorite theme in How to Win. Back to Spellslinging. Remember, we're playing instants and sorceries, and there's artifacts out there that can copy these instants and sorceries, making them even more devastating. So with Izzet, you're looking at burn, mill, draw cards, looting effects. There's so many abilities that Izzet does for instants and sorceries. You should have a blast. But what you should take from this is that there's artifacts that have synergy with these instants and sorceries that make them even more stronger, even more efficient, and even more powerful. Look for cards. Here are a couple of cards I suggest. Let's go. Okay, we're going to start right over here on the left-hand side. We got Cursed Recording, 4 mana artifact. That means we can tutor that. All we need is a 3 CMC artifact. Once we attack with Iron Man, we can slap this on the battlefield. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a time counter on Cursed Recording. Then if there are 7 or more time counters on it, remove those counters and it deals 20 damage to you. Ouch. We're not worried about that because guess what? You can sacrifice it later on before it gets 7 time counters on it. No worries. Okay, it's a tap ability. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. What's disgusting about this? All you do is tap it and you get to copy a spell. What? Your favorite spell gets copied, no matter what CMC it is. If it's a 7 CMC spell, tap this, play your spell, copied. Here we go. Next up on the right-hand side, Pyromancer's Goggles. This is a staple. For 5 mana, legendary artifact. Remember, we're spellslinging here, so we're casting instants and sorceries. Tap it, add a red mana. When that mana is spent to cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell and you may choose new targets for that copy. Cool. So guess what? This is almost the same thing, but we get to mana ramp. This is also a mana dork. So when you tutor this, you get a mana dork and a copy spell. Also, little pro tip: if you have a multicolored spell that is red and blue, that card counts as a red spell also. I will repeat: if you have a multicolored spell that is red and blue, it counts as a red spell also. So look, right here on the right-hand side, we got to start there first because this is a two-sided card. One of the most powerful ambulance artifacts for instants and sorceries out here, okay? We got the Primal Amulet for 4 mana. That means we got to sack something for 3 CMC to get this if we use Iron Man. It says instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Okay, let me tell y'all this. It is super efficient in Izzet colors to have a cost reducer. I believe that because you are limited into the amount of ramp spells, and even when you ramp, those ramp spells have some kind of malleability that is temporary. So it doesn't last compared to dropping lands into play. That's why I think cost reducers are essential to Izzet colors. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Primal Amulet. Then if there are 4 more charge counters on it, you may remove those counters and transform it. When it transforms, it turns into Primal Wellspring. Back to Primal Amulet. This is super amazing because you get to tutor this and put this on the battlefield. Most of the time, if you ever play with this card, paying 4 mana, then having another spell to play on that same turn is too expensive. That's what makes Iron Man amazing. So as soon as this comes on the battlefield, even if it comes in tapped, you get to use its ability, which is reducing the cost of instants and sorceries. Next up, Primal Wellspring on the left-hand side. It's a land. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. When that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell and you may choose new targets for the copy. If you are a Spellslinger, this is an awesome card. Literally, if you have this in your Iron Man deck, you save a turn when you birthing pod the Primal Amulet. I believe you will actually get Primal Wellspring faster using Iron Man compared to generally playing the card because this is a threat for your opponents. They will destroy and remove it. Okay, so we're gonna start over here on the left-hand side. We got Lithiform Engine, 4 mana legendary artifact. Tap 2. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. What we will ideally copy is Iron Man's triggered ability because a triggered ability is when it happens, like whenever, when you do something, something like that, right? So when you attack, Iron Man creates a treasure token. So we get to copy that ability and get 2 treasure tokens, then sack 2 non-creature artifacts. Amazing. Back to tap 3 mana, copy target instant sorcery spell. That's what we're doing here in Spellslinger. We are trying to copy more spells. We want to copy more spells, get more value out of it. This card is even better because you tap 4 mana, copy target permanent spell you control. So a permanent spell could be an enchantment, saga, creature, another artifact, even another land. Oh my God. That's the first time I actually thought about that. Wow. Copy target permanent. A land is a permanent. So that's a nasty way to mana ramp. Okay, on the right hand side is the famous Isochron Scepter for 2 mana, 2 CMC. It's an artifact. It has imprint. When Isochron Scepter enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. That's good because there's so many powerful 2 CMC or less instants that either are removal, bounce spells, draw cards, or some kind of card that just, you could say phases out a creature, especially if you're playing blue. Tap 2. You may copy the exile card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Welcome to the section where we are cloning either creatures, your commander. These are cards that you're going to see, hopefully give you ideas about your combat phase and what you want to do with them. I will say ultimately, when you are cloning your creature, you're going through your combat phase, you're dealing damage, and it would be a good idea to actually have a loop for infinite combat phases so you can just attack with a legion of clones. But let me show you some cards here that do some cloning effects that you can add to your deck. Okay, we got one of the most popular cards here, the Esoteric Duplicator for 3 mana, Artifact Clue. Whenever you sacrifice Esoteric Duplicator or another artifact, you are already sacrificing artifacts with Iron Man because when he attacks, you have to sacrifice an artifact. Synergy, y'all. You have to pay 2 mana. If you do, at the beginning of your next end step, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. Wow. You know what that is? You're replacing the artifact that you sacked. So pretty much, you never lose that artifact. That's really good. So especially if it's an artifact that has a uh, leave the battlefield ability, you get a payoff. Then you bring it back by paying 2. Disgusting. Okay, and that's very good for low CMC artifacts. Back to the bottom ability. Tap 2, sack Esoteric Duplicator, draw a card. We don't want to do that. But you can do that as a last resort if a player tries to remove this artifact from the battlefield. Also, what I need to notify you on, this is a clue. A clue, that means a clue token. So when you are deck building, look for synergies that say something, something clue tokens. You get +1/+1 for the amount of clue tokens. Or you get to do something with clue tokens. Synergy right there. On the right hand side, we got Brutaclad Telcore Engineer, one of the most famous, definitely Izzet staples. It's a super cool commander. The reason why, because it is a machine producing artifact commander. What does that mean? You're making a lot of tokens and they transform. It gets pretty, yeah. This is a really popular commander for a reason. Let me get to the card. For 6 mana, Izzet +4, legendary artifact creature, Artificer, on a 4/4 body. It says creature tokens you control have haste. Creature tokens you control have haste. Next up, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 blue Mer artifact creature token. It has haste. Then you may choose a token you control. If you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. So essentially, the 2/1 blue Mer token you created, it can be anything you choose it to be. So if you have a 5/5 golem out there, which is an artifact creature, and you have a board state full of 2/1 Mers, you can make all those tokens, those 2/1 Mer tokens, into that 5/5 golem. That is the transforming part that I'm mentioning. So the question is, what can you do with Iron Man and Brutaclad? Lots of things. Lots of things. The amount of MERS that you make can be synergies to do other things, such as paying for burn spells abilities, creating more clones of other type of creatures. And remember, he gives tokens haste. So even if you don't have MER tokens, you can have 1/1 Thopters that are flying haste creatures, or 5/5 Golem tokens that are hasty. Okay, so we got Cursed Mirror here. For 3 mana, it's an artifact. It's a mana dork. A mana rock, excuse me. You tap it, add 1 red mana. So it says, as Cursed Mirror enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. The reason why I believe this card is good, because it's one of those copy effects for 3 CMC, which is very low end. And you will want to copy something if you tutored it with Birthing Pod from Iron Man on your post-combat main phase, right? Because you won't, if you don't cast it from your pre-combat main phase, you don't get anything from it. So after you attack with Iron Man, you put this out, and maybe there's a creature on the battlefield that you're like, ooh, I like that card's ability. And guess what? That scenario where you actually had 2 CMC artifacts to sack, you can pull out Cursed Mirror and copy that that other creature that's on the battlefield that's wreaking havoc. Think about Avenge of Zendikar. You drop a 5/5 and a bunch of plant tokens onto the battlefield. There's options with this. This is good because it's low CMC. Next up on the right-hand side, we got Synth Infiltrator for 5 mana artifact creature. That means we can tutor it. It's a synth. It has the ability to improvise. The reason why improvise is important because we're playing with an artifact deck, people. Artifacts here. Your artifacts can help cast a spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 mana. So it says you may have Synth Infiltrator enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a synth artifact creature in addition to its other type. For 5 CMC, you get to copy a powerful creature that's on the battlefield, whether it's yours or your opponent's. Use copies and clone creatures to your advantage. Izzet can do that, players. Player. So over here on the left-hand side, we got Mirrorworks, 5 CMC artifact that says whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. Why this card is good? It's because you get to make more artifacts off of one artifact ETBing. And when you're using Iron Man, you're bringing artifacts into play. So tapping 2 mana to get a double of another artifact, this card is just creating value. That's all it does, is create more value and a copy of a spell that the artifact is doing because you're making a second version of it. Next up, we got Sculpting Steel for 3 CMC. Very low end, which I think is very efficient and very underrated. It is an artifact. It says when it ETBs, it becomes a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. So not only does it can copy your artifact on the battlefield, it can copy an opponent's. So if you need something and an opponent has it and it's an artifact, you know what I'm saying here? 3 CMC, drop this bad boy into play and you got a copy of whatever that thing is. You got to think in a commander matchup with 3 other players, players are putting grotesque permanents onto the battlefield. Uh, like it gets crazy. Like the Greatest Hinge, the rate on that card is amazing. So if you get a copy of Greatest Hinge for 3 CMC, you're winning here. Yeah. Super excited for the card on the right hand side. For 3 mana, this is Mirror Box. The reason why I'm putting Iron Man in this deck, because I would love to make clones of Iron Man. Meaning when I attack with him, I'm creating treasure tokens and I'm doing the birthing pot effect. This card bypasses the legendary rule because its first ability says the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Bypasses, so that means I can have 2 Iron Mans on the battlefield plus the commander, and the legendary rule does not say it has to die. Then it says each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1. So that means they are 5/5s. Okay. Next up, each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So, this is just a great card to make clones of Iron Man and not lose Iron Man because of the legendary rule. That's super powerful. Let's get into the next card on the left-hand side. Helm of the Host for 4 mana, legendary artifact, equipment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary if equipped creature is legendary. That token gains haste. So, the legendary rule still applies here, but the token is non-legendary. So you don't lose a copy of Iron Man if you equip Helm of the Host to him. So that way we are swinging with Iron Mans, making a legion of Iron Mans, going to combat, getting his triggered ability, and swinging for damage. Flying haste, a minimum of a 4/4 flyer. So I added Stax to the section/theme here in this quick guide for Iron Man because I think players forgot about him. You get caught up in putting the coolest artifact out on the battlefield. It's okay to have a little sub package in there of stacks, artifacts that deny your opponent's resources, being able to make your commander stay on the battlefield longer. Remember, Iron Man is a 5 CMC commander, so that's going to take a little time for him to get out there on the battlefield and wreak havoc. So, here's a couple cards for you. So, as you play with Iron Man, you know, the first turn he comes out and you need something to paralyze your opponents. We got Winter Moon on for 2 mana. It's an artifact. Players can't untap more than 1 non-basic land during their untap steps. This is powerful because you know how many non-basic lands are out there that tap for either 2 mana or 3 types of mana, and your opponents are relying on them early, mid, and even late game? Yeah, yeah, they have a bunch of copies of lands that tap for different mana, and they're non-basic. This is sneaky, sneaky. And if you get this out early, you can really shut down certain opponents because their lands already come in tapped if it's a non-basic land most of the time. Next up on the right-hand side, we got Defense Grid for 2 CMC. It's an artifact. During each turn, each player's turn. Each other player's spell costs 3 more to play. So this prevents, I wouldn't say prevent, it slows down players from interacting with you during your turn, and vice versa. So if you want to remove a player's creature using some kind of like phase out or a bounce spell, it's going to cost an extra 3 mana. Uh, you can use this card wisely or at the right time, or maybe you have some type of advantage on the battlefield. Generally, a draw card advantage, um, getting you way ahead of your opponents because if they're trying to remove something and you're drawing more cards to them, you're able to get more answers. Defense grid. For 2 mana on the left-hand side here, we got Cursed Totem. It's an artifact that says activated abilities for creatures can't be activated. This is really good because there's creatures that the first ones that come to my mind are elves, where you tap them or you pay a certain amount of mana, then they add more mana or they do something crazy. Cursed Totem shuts that down. They can't activate their abilities. Anything that says tap mana, then do something and tap it, nope. Or just tap mana to do something, nope. Cursed Totem says no, no. Next up is Winter Orb. It's an artifact. As long as Winter Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than 1 land during their untapped steps. Ugh. If you ever play Grand Arbiter of Augustin the Fourth, this artifact goes well with it. But back to Iron Man, this is just another shutdown card to slow players down. It hurts you too, but maybe you're behind, or maybe you want to put other players behind in the game of commander. Like, some players in some decks move at different paces. So being able to drop Winter Orb at the right time can actually stall a whole combat phase, attack phase, a pre-combat May phase, maybe a spell that needs to play, or even sequencing because they only got to untap 1 mana. You got to think about in depth with some of these cards. Denying resources really hurts players a lot. So over here, Throne of Amethyst for 2 mana. It's an artifact. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to play. I like this card because it slows down removal spells. I think that's super important, especially for this artifact creature commander deck. Artifacts are the easiest thing to destroy. So Thorn of Amethyst just says, hey, Swords of Plowshares, you got to pay an extra mana, which nobody really wants to do to get rid of this card. That's why I like Thorn of Amethyst, because artifacts are very susceptible to being removed. Over here on the right-hand side, Dampening Spear, 2 mana artifact. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces colorless instead of any other type and amount. Ooh. So those lands like that mana something, crypt something, whatever that taps for 2 mana, yeah, it only produces 1 and it's colorless. Each spell a player casts 1 more to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. So this prevents players from sequencing and chaining spells together, which is very powerful. This is kind of getting to the deck gameplay when you're going against opponents. When players are casting spells and sequencing, they're trying to put an effect out there that is overwhelming and most likely you probably can't come back from. Storm is a good mechanic that kind of like plays on the idea of chaining spells together, and when you do that, the game is pretty much over. So what Dampening Spear does, it makes that player pay 1 extra mana for the additional spell. Then 2 extra mana for the additional 2 spells. So this prevents them playing a chain of spells. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, we got Torpor Orb for 2 mana. It's an artifact. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. So all those, preferably in my mind, I think of green creatures because every time they enter the battlefield, they destroy something. Or they give something plus X. This shuts that down. Shuts it down. This is a really good card to have because if you're in an artifact deck, creatures entering the battlefield cause abilities to trigger, and they usually destroy artifacts or enchantments. I think of Aura Shards every time. You know how many games you probably lost to Aura Shards, which is a green-white enchantment that says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment? That is going to be your biggest enemy as you pilot an Iron Man deck. It's actually the biggest enemy for any artifact deck. Okay, so we're here at the infinite combo section. The reason why I put this here is because I want you to realize you can find any infinite combo with Iron Man because generally it starts with an artifact. And there's a bunch of artifacts that enable combos. Whether you are a spell slinger and you have an X spell, or maybe you are looking for infinite card draw, uh, let's see, untap effects. Iron Man is able to tutor that and put it on the battlefield. So you actually get to play and look for answers during gameplay for whatever you're trying to do, whatever your game plan is. That's why I like Iron Man. So he's not like a finite type of commander. He's infinite. Like it's literally up to you what kind of deck you want to build. And remember, like I said in the beginning of the video, artifacts do every ability in the game. There's an artifact that does some type of an ability. You can find it. It may cost high, it may cost low, but there is an ability out there on an artifact that you like. Here's a couple examples of infinite combos that you can tutor using the birthing pod effect. So first off, I'm not into explaining infinite combos. This is an infinite colorless mana combo. So what I'm trying to tell you is search for combos, and there's an artifact out there that does something for you in red and blue. This one just gives you infinite mana. If you're a spellslinger and you got an X spell such as maybe a giant mill effect or maybe a fireball effect, you want infinite mana. And guess what? With Iron Man, you can tutor these, drop these on the battlefield. That turn, next turn, sequencing, following turns, you get to activate the ability. No longer are you waiting to draw it or casting spells to draw it. There's oftentimes in Izzet colors, you're always drawing to the win con. Drawing to the win con. Iron Man eliminates drawing. We're tutoring. We're putting onto the battlefield. We are creating the game ending spells. Okay, so these three cards are just one example, the power of artifacts that do any or every type of ability in the game of Magic. I'm not going to explain it because it goes infinite pretty much. Staff of Domination here in the middle, it allows you to gain life, it allows you to untap creature, it allows you to draw cards, and there's also Soul Ring, which allows you to add mana. These go infinite, and you can do all three of those type of effects, right? Um, Depending on what you want to do, you can do that with Iron Man. I feel like I keep repeating myself. However, the beauty of Iron Man is artifacts do every ability in the game. So you're not limited to what you see on EDH Rec. Get creative. Think about or find cards maybe that are poison counters, uh, death touch, instance of sorcery, X spells, yada yada yada, right? Mill effects. Um, you just have the power. There's no limit, and you actually get to play them. That's what makes, I believe, Iron Man fun. You actually get to play the artifacts. This section is super important. Token increasers. Usually you're adding +1. This is type of gameplay that you need to add value on the battlefield, right? When you're adding +1 of something, 2 treasure tokens, 3 treasure tokens, that either gives you more mana for the bigger spell or sequencing of spells, right? You want to destroy your opponents with overwhelming effects, where it's an explosive gameplay. You know, for example, Iron Man, he swings, he does 4 damage to somebody, he creates a treasure token, you sack an artifact, you put out another artifact, maybe it's a creature or something with an awesome ETB, and guess what? You're just playing on effects. He's a nice layering type of commander where if you build your deck the way you want to, you should be doing a bunch of effects after effects after effects. He's a very explosive type of commander. So these are a couple cards that are token increasers, and you might even find replacers in there. Okay, so we got World Walker Helm for 3 mana. It's an artifact. If you would create one or more artifact tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional map token. It's an artifact with tap 1, sacrifices artifact, target creature you control explores. Activate only as a sorcery. Explorers are able to, allows you to look at the top card and pretty much put a +1/+1 counter if you like it or not. Okay, you probably won't use that here with Iron Man, but you could. You could. Can't say that. Otherwise, you tap 2 mana here and create a token that's a copy of target artifact token you control. Disgusting. This should have been in the cloning section, but if you jump to this section, you should enjoy this because tapping 2 mana to create a token that's a copy of target artifact token you control. Remember, you can create token copies of a powerful creature, such as Helm of the Host creates a copy of Iron Man, but it's not legendary. So when you use Helm, tap 2 mana, you can create the token copy of the token of Iron Man. You see where I'm going here? Like, you can just create clones on clones on clones and more copies. And this adds to the battlefield another artifact that you can provide more synergies with. Next up, we got Simulacrum Synthesizer. For 3 mana, it's an artifact. When it ETBs, scry 2. That's where you look at the top 2 cards. You can put 1 on top, back on top, 2 back on top, or a combination of 1 on the bottom, 1 on top, or both at the bottom. Um, yeah, whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. This gets really nasty. You know, often your most powerful artifact spells are costing 3 or more. So when you use Iron Man's birthing pot ability, you're getting a colorless construct, a creature. You're going wide. You're creating a board state. You're creating blockers. You're creating attackers. This card just synchronizes very well with it. I don't know what else to tell you. It's a must include, actually. Oh, you gotta like Zorn over here on the left hand side. It's a red elemental creature that's a 3/2 body. He says if you would create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. Guess what? Iron Man is creating a treasure token upon attack. So you get to create 2. This is a good card because it's 3 CMC. Play it before Iron Man even comes out. So by the time you play Iron Man at 5 CMC, you create 2. That's great bonus. And you don't even come on, man. This is a no-brainer. Anyway, Forsaken Monument over here on the right-hand side. It's 5 CMC, legendary artifact. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Generally, your golems and artifact creatures are colorless, but keep in mind there are some that are blue or red. Blue or red. It also says whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add an additional colorless mana. So this includes lands that tap for colors, it will add for 2. This includes mana rocks that tap for colors, it will add an additional 1. Soul Ring taps for 2 colors. So if you have Forsaken Monument out, it will tap for 3 instead. And like people, like I mentioned Mirror Box earlier, where it bypasses the legendary rule. You can create copies of Forsaken Monument if you really wanted to, as long as you have Mirror Box out there or something that says the legendary rule doesn't apply. Anyways, whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. Artifacts are colorless spells. 2 life adds up quickly. And you get you don't get to gain life in red blue. So this card is just synchronizes very well with artifact spells. And also Forsaken Monument, you need to search it, has a lot of combos in it. You can go infinite with this, infinite mana. There's combos out there with that. So don't hesitate to add Forsaken Monument. Okay, so we got Academy Manufacturer over here. A 3 CMC artifact creature assembly worker on a 1/3 body. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. So when you have Iron Man and he swings for whatever damage, his attack trigger, you get a treasure token. Not only do you get a treasure token, if you have a Academy Manufacturer out, you get a treasure token, clue token, food token, all 3 of those. More artifacts for you to sacrifice or find some kind of synergy with. This is just a good card to increase the rate of efficiency. So we're to the section where we got mana artifacts, right? They're called mana rocks, but you should be looking for mana rocks that add an extra effect to your commander, making them more powerful, or depending on what type of game plan you're working with. Okay, so let's get into a couple of them. Let's go. Midnight Clock for 3 CMC is an artifact. Tap it, add a blue mana. Tap 3 of it, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. At the beginning of each upkeep, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. When the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards. So, what is good about this card is it's a wheel card pretty much, and you can get 12 hour counters on it very fast. Very fast. If you never played it, it gets on it very fast. You tap 2 colors and a blue, you put 1. But at each upkeep, 1, 2, 3 players in front of you, that's another 3. So that's 4 pretty much each turn. That's decided if you don't want to add an additional 2 mana and tap out. Uh, why it's nasty is because people are probably not going to remove it. They're not. There's other threats on the board besides a clock that's waiting to give you 7 new cards. Next up is Crystal Skull Isu Spyglass for 4 mana, 2 blue, 2 colors. Legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. That's stupid powerful. You may play historic lands and cast historic spells from the top of your library. Historics are artifacts, wow. Legendaries, wow. Sagas included, which are enchantments. So, being able to play an additional card, not in your hand, but it's on the top of your library, is very powerful. That is an extra card, essentially. Tap it for 1 blue mana. So we're here, keep showing you artifacts that you can tutor with Iron Man. Nothing less here is Volshock Factory for 3 mana. It's an artifact. Tap it, add red 1 mana, put a charge counter on Volshock Factory. Tap 3 mana, a red and 2, tap it, sacrifice Volshock Factory, create an XX Colors Golem artifact creature token with haste, where X is the number of charge counters on Volshock, activate only as a sorcery. This is good because it's a mana rock that essentially can create a very powerful creature, and it creates an additional artifact. So what makes it also powerful, I feel like it goes under the radar. Nobody's really blowing up mana rocks unless they really decide to hate on you. Next up, Machine God's Effigy for 4 mana, artifact. Disgusting, actually. You may have Machine God's Effigy enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact and it has tap, add blue mana. It also says tap, blue mana. So back to the cloning section, this is just another card that it can be another creature and tap for blue mana. It could be, I don't know what is going to be on the battlefield on your side, but for 4 mana, create a creature and add blue mana. Okay, on the left-hand side here, we got 500 Year Diary for 4 mana, legendary artifact Clue. Remember, we're talking about Clue synergy. Remember the previous Clue artifact I told you about earlier. 500 Diary enters the battlefield tapped. Tap it. Add blue mana for each clue you control. Tap 2, sacrifice 500 Year Diary, draw a card. So this is very good if you're a Spellslinger and you got 3 clues on the battlefield through Academy Manufacturer or some other way. A 4 mana tap 3 blue. Ew. That adds a lot of mana. Elemental's Palette on the right hand side here for 3 mana artifact. Whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, put 2 charge counters on Elemental's Palette. Tap it, add 1 mana of any color. That's just good in general. A 3 CMC artifact, a mana rock that adds 1 mana of any color, and with additional abilities. Okay. Also, it says tap it, add colorless for each charge counter on Elemental's Palette. Spend this mana only in the cast that contains X. So, there's a bunch of X spells out there spell slingers love to have. You tap 2 of these using this, 2 is a very good rate. 3 is a very great rate. 4 is a very great rate. There's a bunch of X spells out there. I am thinking some players could add a bunch of X spells in their deck. So this could work very well. Okay, so we're to one of my favorite themes here, equipments. What's awesome about Iron Man is you get to tutor those equipments and put them onto the battlefield. I think the most powerful equipments to tutor with are the ones that have the auto equip ability, which is when it says attach equipment to target creature when this enters the battlefield. That is auto equipping. Auto equipping. So look for that next time you find other equipments out there. That's super powerful. That literally bypasses equip cost. But let's get into a couple of artifact equipments that are pretty useful for Iron Man. The perfect example is Mithril Coat for 3 CMC legendary artifact equipment. It has flash, so if you can just cast this at any time you really want to. It says indestructible, so this equipment is indestructible. When it ETBs, attach it to target legendary creature you control. That's what I'm talking about, that auto equip. So when you Birthing Pod Mithril Coat, you can just automatically attach it to Iron Man. Disgusting. Making Iron Man indestructible because he says equipped creature has indestructible. Whatever scenario where this gets removed or Iron Man gets detached from Mithril Coat, the equip cost is 3. There's nothing else to say. Nettle Cyst on the right hand side here for 3 mana. It's an artifact equipment. It's a living weapon. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ, then attach this to it. Okay, cool. Equip creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. Equip 2. So what we're doing here is using the synergy of all the artifacts and enchantments we have on the battlefield. You're playing with an artifact deck, so I'm just saying, if you got 5 artifacts out there and you eventually attach this to Iron Man, he's a 9/9 flying haste with his attack trigger. It only gets better, people. I need y'all to put this together. I just mentioned all those artifacts on the battlefield. Remember, treasure tokens are artifacts. We got the Reaver Cleaver for 3 CMC, legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. And that's more mana, more artifact synergies, more mana. This equip cost us 3. I don't need to elaborate. All right, over here on Hexplate Wallbreaker for 5 CMC artifact equipment for Mirrodin. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2. Whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap each attacking creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Cool, this is an additional combat phase. Yeah, you want additional combat phase if you plan on doing combat damage with your commander, if that is your win con scenario. So imagine all those clones, making more clones, additional combat phases, copying this artifact. Yeah, this can get real ugly. Real ugly. Okay. We got Commander's Plate. Comes with Iron Man if you bought the bundle thing, right? Artifact equipment, equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. Equipped commander for 3, equipped for 5. Protection from each color that's not in your commander's ability. Green, white, and black. Disgusting. So those are the common colors that are removable, especially if you're an artifact. Uh, Green destroys artifact or enchantments. Black destroys target creature or exile creature. White just destroys artifact or enchantment. This is a must include in your artifact commander. Next up is Hammer of Nazan for 4 mana legendary artifact equipment. Whenever Hammer of Nazan or another equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has indestructible. Equip 4. So literally, this can sit on the battlefield, and when you tutor other equipments, you can attach them to Iron Man. What else I can say? Like, it doesn't have to be attached to Iron Man. You attach other equipments to them, making him a Voltron commander at a faster pace. This is an auto include. All right, I'm going to show you some cost reducers. They might be reduced costs in other ways, but they're essential when you're playing Izzet. Izzet is just mana restricted, so I feel like you need to capitalize on maximizing your mana each turn and each possibility when needed. Is also the downfall of Izzet when you tapped out, you are. I mean, this goes for everybody, but when you're tapped out, you are very susceptible for getting your board state blown up. So cost reducers are essential. So we need to capitalize on the amount of tokens we are dropping onto the battlefield because we are an artifact deck. This ability that I'm about to mention is called Improvise. So on the left-hand side here, we have Archway of Innovation. It is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island. That's easy. You can tap it at a blue, or you can tap blue mana and tap it. The next spell you cast a turn has improvise. The next spell you cast has improvise. That could be an artifact, creature, enchantment, saga, anything. Next spell. Instant or sorcery, next spell. That's pretty powerful. Next up, we have Inspiring Statuary. For 3 mana, it's an artifact. Non-artifact spells you cast have improvise. So if you're looking to cast an instant sorcery, enchantment, or a creature, it has improvise. So you're just looking to reduce the cost of spells just by tapping artifacts that may not even have a tap ability also, which is pretty amazing. So being able to tap an artifact, sack an artifact, and just get an ability off an ability, an effect off an effect after effect during each phase for something is just incredible. That's what y'all need to look at. Also consider phases: pre-combat main phase, combat main phase, post-combat main phase. Uh, Sequencing. I feel like improvise allows you to sequence spells, and it adds mana in a different way. And those artifacts are mana, allows you to have more mana long term for these additional phases. So all my Spellslingers out here, this is the auto include. Mind Splice Apparatus is a 4 CMC artifact with flash, meaning you can play it any time. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on Mind Splice Apparatus. Instant and source spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on Mind Splice Apparatus. So what does that mean? If you play it before your turn, at the beginning of your upkeep, you get at least 1 oil counter. So that means you get to reduce instant source spells by 1. The longer on this is on the battlefield, or if you proliferate, the more spells cost less. And you want to do that in Izzet. You want to get the most value out of Izzet, because that color scheme is just limited to his mana. Okay, we're looking at reducing more spells and costs. Jor is familiar. 4 CMC, artifact, creature, bird, flying. Historic spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. This includes your commander. Just plan on your commander being removed, and you have Jor out. It may not cost 7 to cast. It may cost 6 to cast next time. That's why this card is beneficial. Honestly, 5 CMC commanders, I initially look at casting them 2 times in a game. That's how I plan on building the deck, because I plan on players removing them. And if I have Iron Man and he's tutoring and birthing pod artifacts into play, you better believe players are going to remove him. On the right hand side, we have Ballad of the Black Flag. 2 blue, colorless, a saga. First 3 times, you mill 3 cards. You may put a historic card from among them into your hand. So it lasts 4 turns pretty much, right? Then it says historic spells you cast cost us 2 less to cast. So essentially the spell is milling you and you're retrieving historic spells to play later on. And on that 4th turn, you get to play historic spells for 2 less. This is kind of a pace card, timing card that very underrated. I haven't really seen anybody add this in their deck yet. Milling is crazy powerful because you can mill other cards that have flashbacks, or that have abilities that say when it hits the graveyard from a library, it does such and such and such and such. Or you want a certain amount of artifacts in your graveyard, or a certain amount of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. This card is very utilitarian. Okay, on the left-hand side, we have Enthusiastic Mechonaut. Red and a blue, artifact, creature, goblin, artificer, flying, 2/2 body, artifact spells you cost 1 less to cast. Don't need to really elaborate on that. We are playing an artifact commander and a bunch of artifact spells. They cost 1 less. Artificer's class on the right-hand side, tap 2. It is a enchantment class. I love these a lot because they sit on the battlefield, and when you need to level up, you do it at sorcery speed, and you pay the mana requirement. So when the first time it happens, the first artifact spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Great. Level 2, tap another 2, blue and colors. When this class becomes level 2, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. We're in an artifact deck, so being able to look for more artifacts efficiently and put them in your hand, or just, you know, getting through your library is efficient. Tap 6, level 3. At the beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control. So you just get a list of effects for a total of 2, 4, plus 6, 10 mana at your pace. At your pace. That's what makes this card really good. And players underestimate it because when you have 6 mana and you want to make a copy of a token because it's the right time, you're adding more value onto the battlefield. Protection, protection. Iron Man is a 5 CMC commander. Personally, when I build decks like this, or for 5 CMC commanders, I plan on casting them twice. So 2 command attacks, that's a 7 CMC commander. That's very expensive. So I'm looking to protect him often. And honestly, you got to protect the artifacts too, because artifacts are easily destroyed. Let's get into a couple artifacts or spells that protect your commander. Okay, I got Reality Ripple for 2 mana, blue and a colorless. It's an instant. Target artifact, creature, or land phases out. I think this card is crazy powerful. Phasing out means the card disappears and comes back at the beginning of your upkeep, just as it was. So, what's good about this is there's probably important artifacts that you want on the battlefield, and you want to save it because a player is playing a board wipe that says destroy all artifacts, destroy your commander. This way, it just leaves the battlefield and comes back at a different time. So you're not really losing it, you're saving it. Next up, we have Padim, Console of Innovation, 4 mana, legendary creature, Vidakan, Artificer, 1/4 body. Artifacts you control have hexproof. Awesome. So that protects our commander and all the artifacts that we are Birthing Pod putting on the battlefield. Pretty much he becomes the target. An opponent needs to target this to get rid of hexproof on all of our artifacts. This is good because the hexproof are equipments also. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest mana value or tie for the highest mana value, you probably will, draw a card. Cool. More protection spells here. We got Ring of Evil's Isle for 2 mana. It taps 2 creature, gains hexproof until end of turn. You're probably looking at it and like, why would I only pay 2 mana at that point in time to give my creature hexproof? It's just an option. It's just an option. The reason why I do like that is because it doesn't say your commander's not able to be destroyed or not being able to remove. It's kind of one of those teasers where your opponent's been waiting to do it, and you give them that luxury, and you're baiting them for another play. That's why I like this. When you play Magic with some experienced players, they want you, especially CEDH, they're baiting you into plays. So once you get caught in the bait, they run their entire combo, and that's game because you fell for it, or the timing looked right for you to remove it. Also, Ring of Evil's Isle does at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on an equipped creature if it's blue. Your commander is blue. He's blue and red. Equip costs 1. So not only does this power boost your commander, it gives it hexproof on a timing type of factor. Lightning Greaves. Y'all all know this card. For 2 mana, equipped creature has haste and shroud, equip 0. I do not like this card, honestly, because shroud says it can't be the target of spells or abilities. That includes equip cost. So essentially, you need to equip everything, other equipments to Iron Man before you equip Lightning Greaves on it. And honestly, Lightning Greaves is just an easy target to destroy. Everybody will definitely blow up Lightning Greaves once it's on the battlefield. But good thing is, once it hits the battlefield through Birthing Pod, you can equip it in the post-combat main phase to Iron Man. These are a couple cards that I believe can benefit the certain type of deck you might be planning on building. So do not underestimate these. I think these cards are very valuable in their own shape or form or fashion, and you can make them very powerful or create explosive turns with them. And one of these cards is actually one of my favorite commanders that I did a video back in the day. But let's get into it. Okay, so Indomitable Creativity for 3 red and X. Essentially, how can I describe this? We are dropping every type of artifact or creature from our deck into the battlefield, maximum potential best scenario. So let me read the card. It's a sorcery. Destroy X target artifacts or creatures. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until an artifact or creature card is revealed and exiles that card. Those players put the exile cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. This is a polymorph effect. So, with Iron Man, you're going to have a bunch of artifacts or creatures on the battlefield. You can destroy your own board state and potentially put out the big artifacts or creatures that you want to be on the battlefield. You're gambling, but there is a scenario where you can't have Iron Man on the battlefield because he's been removed too many times and a bunch of commander taxes going on. And you got this, and you want maybe put out a planar portal. You get to put out a planar portal because you destroyed a rinky-dink mana rock. That's why I like this card. It's the randomness, creativity, indomitable creativity. Moving on. Okay, we got Galazeth Prismari. This is one of my favorite commanders. 4 CMC, blue-red, 2 colors, 3/4, Elder Dragon. It has flying. When he enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. So if you blink him, you create another treasure token. Whenever he leaves and flies back in, you're creating a treasure token. Super cool. It looks like he's blowing out a fireball. I know you like that art. Anyway, he says artifacts you control have tap. Add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. All those treasure tokens you have, you don't have to sacrifice them if you're casting an instant or sorcery. Disgusting. So you just tap the treasure token or tap a clue token, tap a food token, tap a myrrh, tap a mana rock, and you get to make mana of any color and cast an instant or sorcery spell. This is really nasty if you did some kind of theft ability where you stole another player's instant or sorcery spell and you need mana to cast it. Bam, you tap it. Don't underestimate Galazeth Prismari, players. For only 2 mana, Mind Crank. Famous. It's very famous. It's an artifact. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. So, if you get this out with Iron Man, whenever you deal damage to an opponent, they're milling a card. Or whenever an opponent destroys or damages another opponent, they're milling cards. If you make this a mill deck or a mill effect, hey, this just adds to the milling layers of effects. It's just easy to play, easy to put in. When you mill, you eliminate threats, possibly. There are decks that want graveyard synergies, but essentially you're removing threats before they even happen. That's why Mind Crank is good. That's why milling is good. So, thank you for making this far to the video. If you made it to the very end, this is the quick guide to Iron Man. Hopefully it helped you out. Like I said, I wanted you to just get an idea of all the type of artifacts and their abilities that you can do with this commander. The most powerful thing about this commander is you actually get to play with the artifact that you want to put onto the battlefield. Most of the time, you're trying to draw into an artifact, or you got to tutor an artifact by this one spell, which eliminates more cards in your deck. Iron Man bypasses all that. You get to play whatever type of artifacts you want, and you put them into the battlefield, and you are a threat. That's what makes Iron Man powerful. Also, what makes him powerful is artifacts do every type of ability in the game. So it's literally up to you what type of artifact and what type of ability you want to put into your deck and what type of win con you want to have. Get creative, player. Share your ideas. Let me know if you love this video or not by hitting the like button and the subscribe button and commenting below saying that this video was awesome. Peace.